President Biden had already said that he wants to spend his remaining months in office working on bold reform to the United States Supreme Court. Today, he finally spelled out what that means. He called for 3 specific changes. 1, fix the damage done by the recent court decision that said presidents are free to commit crimes without fear of prosecution. He says that should be undone the only way you can undo something like that, which is with a constitutional amendment. Number 2, he said there should be term limits for Supreme Court justices. They shouldn't serve for life anymore. He said there should be 18-year terms. He said that would have the effect of stopping any single president from reshaping the bench for a generation. And third, he said we should institute a binding code of conduct, an ethics code, so justices would at least need to report things like the lavish vacations they have quietly been accepting from rich people who have an interest in the cases that are before the court. That today was President Biden's very specific 3-part pitch for trying to restore public trust in the Supreme Court. Now, at least one justice, Justice Elena Kagan, has already said yes to part of that in concept, saying there does need to be an enforceable code of ethics. Justices should no longer be allowed to just police themselves, since clearly that is not working. So there's that to start. Writing today at Slate.com, the civil rights attorney and legal scholar Sherrilyn Ifill underlined the urgency of this moment. She said, quote, in just the last 3 terms alone, this court has upended longstanding precedents, fundamentally changing the allocation of power between the branches of government, wiping away rights it formerly deemed fundamental, and upending the protections and guarantees upon which tens of millions of Americans had come to rely for decades. Joining us now is Sherrilyn Ifill. She's the Vernon E. Jordan Jr. Endowed Chair in Civil Rights at Howard University Law School, and one of my favorite people to talk to about anything, but especially the Supreme Court. Sherrilyn, it's really nice to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rachel.
You have been an advocate for a long time that the court needs discipline, effectively, that the court needs reform, that it has behaved in such a way in recent years that rightfully call its legitimacy into question to the public in a way that's dangerous, given the important role of the court in our society and in our system of government. What do you assess as the sort of the weight, the heft, the potential to meet the moment of these reforms proposed today by President Biden?
Well, it's going to be a very steep climb. Obviously, this is not something that can be done by presidential fiat or by executive order. It would require Congress to pass legislation. And that means that obviously this will not happen with this Congress. But if the next Congress is to take it up, it would likely mean you would have to have a majority of Democrats in both the House and the Senate. And that's why talking about this election, it's important to not just talk about the president if you want Supreme Court reform. But it's also a heavy lift because, look, Rachel, it's difficult. It's difficult for me as a litigator to talk about these kinds of reforms and the need for them. But as a civil rights lawyer, as someone who believes in democracy, and as someone who understands the power of this court, not only to hold the line in the rule of law, but also to get us off the track of healthy democracy. The court has done it in the past. And I think we have to take very, very seriously what this court is doing, the track that it's on, and what it could potentially do to our country.
It is my sense that the effort around the Trump-Vance candidacy in the Republican Party is in part about trying to get them votes, but it is in a significant part about trying to get the election to be contested in some technical way so that it ends up in the courts for some reason or another. Because I believe Republicans think as long as it gets into the courts, it gets ultimately to the Supreme Court. And no matter what is before the Supreme Court, they would do whatever was necessary to put Donald Trump back in the White House. I say that as a non-lawyer and just an observer of the political processes here and what Republicans have been working on in the lead up to this election. Can I ask if you share those concerns?
If you had asked me this question a year ago, I might have hesitated. But after the Supreme Court's decision in the 14th Amendment Section 3 case, in which the court essentially read out of the 14th Amendment the provision that says insurrectionists cannot serve by coming up with this idea that Congress needs to pass some legislation to make that provision of the 14th Amendment effective, the court's decision in the charges brought by the Justice Department against many of the January 6 rioters, And then, of course, finally, the Trump immunity case, the presidential immunity case, which is absolutely mystifying unless you believe what the dissenters, I think, the three women appointed by Democrats have been trying to tell us. And their dissents have grown ever more strident and strong as they have tried to warn us that this court essentially is behaving as though it is in the tank for Trump. It does not matter to me whether they are, in fact, in the tank for Trump. That is how they are behaving. And they are making leaps and bounds. This is the part that it's hard, I think, for non-lawyers to understand, is how the court is violating the rules of litigation, the way we bring cases before the court, who we say can bring cases before the court, how those decisions are made, what kinds of questions are raised by a piece of litigation. The court is making fast and loose with those rules that govern how people like me litigate in the court. And so they are so recklessly determined to get to the outcome that they want in these cases, not that just the Trump case, but the abortion case, the affirmative action case, that they are running roughshod over the rules that we play by. And that's what makes a legal system fair, is if we all have to abide by the same rules. And once you don't have the same rules of the game, you no longer have a legal system of integrity. And so I think at this point, we have to recognize what is in front of us. We may not want to, but we have to. And I'm gratified that President Biden, this has been a long road for him as well, at least has clearly put this issue before the American people, and Vice President Harris has endorsed it as well. And we have to grapple with our reticence and our discomfort and confront the fact that this also can be a threat to our democracy. It's not just Donald Trump. It is also a court that does not see itself bound by any rules and that appears to have an agenda.
Sherilyn Ifill, endowed civil rights chair at Howard University Law School. Thank you for this. That is both hard to hear and it strikes me as profoundly true. Thank you so much. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Rachel.
We'll be right back.
Tonight on The ReidOut.
And again, Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Do you believe if Donald Trump were elected next year that he would try to stay in office beyond a second term? That he would never leave office?
There's no question.
You think he would try to stay in power forever?
Absolutely.
The stakes could not be higher. Trump says if he wins, you won't have to vote anymore. Tonight, we are laying out the dangers of Project 2025, the manifesto that would give him that authoritarian power, limit your rights, and force you and your family to change the way you live your life. And we begin this special episode of The ReidOut tonight with a dire warning for our democracy. Over the next hour, I will lay out the greatest threat to the American democratic experiment in modern times. And it's called Project 2025. With just 99 days till Election Day, and with voting starting a lot sooner than that in some states like Pennsylvania, where early voting begins in September, it is imperative that every American understand what Project 2025 is about and how it would affect every single one of us if it was ever enacted. Tonight is just the first of many nights where we will dig into this dangerous plan. And I really want you to listen, learn, take notes, and share it with everyone you know. And if you look on your screen, you'll notice that QR code where you can find our segments on Project 2025 so you can share them. So let's start with the basics. This is the 922-page MAGA manifesto. We printed the whole thing out, and it's brought to you by one of the most conservative D.C. think tanks, the Heritage Foundation. This is the culmination of nearly 50 years of work that began during the Reagan administration. Broadly, according to Heritage President Kevin Roberts, this is a Christian nationalist plan to end what he calls the Great Awakening and, quote, rescue our kids, reclaim our culture, revive our economy, and defeat the anti-American left at home and abroad. This manifesto, which they call a book, is a specific roadmap on how to accomplish that by giving a Republican president unprecedented power. They do that by slashing the federal government's footprint, gutting regulations, slashing the money we spend on children, students, the elderly, the environment, education, and reproductive health care. Every single chapter describes in excruciating detail how to reorder our society by dismantling federal agencies and limiting the federal government's ability to help protect you, the American people, from predatory businesses, excessive taxes, poisoned air and water, you name it. Lately, former President Donald Trump and his campaign, fearful of how unpopular Project 2025 is, have claimed they have nothing to do with it.
I don't know what the hell it is. It's Project 25. He's involved in Project, and then they read some of the things, and they are extreme. I mean, they're seriously extreme. But I don't know anything about it. I don't want to know anything about it.
Yeah, but that's not the complete picture. Here is Trump promoting the Heritage Foundation and their little project just 2 years ago.
Heritage does such an incredible job, and they're going to lay the groundwork and detailed plans for exactly what our movement will do and what your movement will do when the American people give us a colossal mandate to save America. And that's coming. That's coming.
Here's the other truth. Roughly 140 individuals who worked in Trump's administration are affiliated with Project 2025, including 6 former cabinet secretaries and 4 people who were nominated as ambassadors by Trump. The others were either key figures from his first transition, close Oval Office allies, or mid-level agency officials. There's Russell Vought, Trump's former Office of Management and Budget Director, who wrote Chapter 2 in the section titled Taking the Reins of Federal Government. In this chapter, he lays out how to consolidate power around a president's political vision. He explains how you can bypass Congress and only fund projects that ensure consistency with the president's agenda. He is rumored to be Trump's choice for chief of staff. And according to Politico, he and Trump speak once a month. Vought hopes his close relationship with Trump will elevate Christian nationalism as a focal point of a second Trump administration. Then there's Roger Severino, a former Trump administration DOJ official, who wrote Chapter 14 about the Department of Health and Human Services and how to restrict abortion access across the country. Severino is a dogmatic anti-abortion militant who strongly believes that an America that allows abortion cannot survive.
The federal government has an absolute role in this. There cannot be now 2 Americas. One America where unborn life is protected and another where unborn life is treated as the equivalent of medical waste. Yeah. Right. That is untenable. This has to be settled nationally. A house divided against itself cannot stand. Yeah. We can't have 2 classes of Americans.
In Project 2025, he advocates for using the regulatory powers of the Department of Health and Human Services, the Food and Drug Administration, and the Department of Justice and the National Institutes of Health to end access to mifepristone, prohibit stem cell research, and create, quote, pro-life task force in the White House. There's also Richard Hanania, who helped contribute to Project 2025. Now, he's not a recognizable name, but he's a popular conservative activist with fans like J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel, and Elon Musk, who just so happens to be a noted racist and sexist. The Huffington Post reported that Hanania used a fake pen name to write articles and social media posts that expressed support for eugenics and forced sterilization of, quote, low IQ people, whom he argued were most often black. And he dreamed about a white awakening, which is when whites en masse realize that they are superior to non-whites and that they'd be better off abandoning multiracial democracy for something resembling a whites-only ethno-state. While those guys are cooking up plans for how the government would work and who it would work for, John McEntee, Trump's former body man and former director of his presidential personnel office, is working with Project 2025 to build the enforcement army. He is currently a senior advisor at Project 2025 with the single task of creating a resume database of dedicated MAGA warriors to staff up every agency. Well, the ones that they don't shutter completely, like the Department of Education, on day one. Here's what McEntee wrote when he took the job. Quote, "The presidential personnel database will be of extraordinary value for the 47th president because we are doing a lot of the incoming administration's most important work ahead of time," unquote. Then there is Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, a self-described radicalized Republican who is a champion of Kevin Roberts and his plan to turn the Heritage Foundation into the de facto institutional home of Trumpism. Here you see Vance and Roberts together on a panel last year at an event hosted by the Intercollegiate Institute, which is a conservative organization for college students. This particular discussion was about regime change and the future of liberalism. Guess what else? Kevin Roberts has a book coming out in September, and J.D. Vance wrote the foreword to that book, in which he praises Roberts' vision for America. He also wrote, "We are now all realizing that it's time to circle the wagons and load the muskets. In the fights that lay ahead, these ideas are an essential weapon." Vance's current political ideology lines up pretty succinctly with that of Project 2025, and his backing of Kevin Roberts, along with his frequent appearances on Tucker Carlson's talk show, might explain why he is on the Trump ticket. This clip from his Senate campaign run might also have helped too.
I think that what Trump should do, like if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people. Yeah, I mean, I think we got to do the hard work of institution building. And again, I've got friends who are working on this very problem right now, such that if there is a Trump administration round 2 or a DeSantis or a Hawley administration, that we actually have the bureaucracy in place so that that person can govern effectively and not be constantly undercut.
Trump, Vance, future staffers, future administration officials, and all of his former employees support parts or all of Project 2025. Do we really think that they would not implement these ideas if given the chance? Up next, I will detail for you explicitly the things they intend to do, from redirecting how we see ourselves socially, how we build our society, how we get by, and most importantly, and the one I worry about the most, how they will completely end how government functions, leaving a less safe, less prosperous, less free country for the majority of Americans.
We're covering this historic Harris presidential bid. The Guardian says her candidacy marks a generational shift with this extraordinary time in American history. Harris, of course, is building on a record that got her all the way up to a heartbeat from the presidency. It's no small thing becoming vice president, the first woman to serve in that office, as you know. And that builds on trailblazers across history. Geraldine Ferraro and Sarah Palin, both getting up to that level at the nomination level in their parties. Hillary Clinton, who not only shattered a glass ceiling, but won more votes in 2016. When people say, oh, is this possible? Would people support a woman as president? She did win more votes. We're the only democracy in the world where the location of the votes matters more than if you get more of them. That's a story for another day. Or take Shirley Chisholm, the first black woman elected to Congress, the first to run for president, as a means to push her party and to try to push black leadership to a new level.
Friends, I am a candidate for the presidency of the United States. I make that statement proudly, in the full knowledge that as a black person and a female person, I do not have a chance of actually gaining that office in this election year. I make that statement seriously, knowing that my candidacy itself can change the face and future of American politics.
Fact check, true. And what an interesting way to push people, acknowledging that doubt up front and then demanding people reckon with why there should be such doubt, why it would be automatic that a woman, quote unquote, could not be president, let alone a black woman at that time. Now, before getting to where she is today, Harris was the only black woman serving at the time in the Senate, and there was only one black female senator before her, Illinois' Carol Moseley Braun, who got that job in '93 and ran on a platform of women's issues, civil rights, economic justice, and took to the Senate floor in her first year to protest the renewal of what was then something that, prior to her being there, was apparently the normal course of action, a congressional patent that basically normalized a Confederate group.
I've got to tell you, this vote is about race. It is about racial symbolism. It is about racial symbols. It is about our racial past, and it is about the single most painful episode in American history.
As I mentioned, we're about to hear from Senator Braun, so I won't go too on and on about this, but I will tell you that if you look at people who have more than one fight to deal with in American society, there's the racial thing and then there's the gender thing, right? She's dealing with both, as other people have. So even apart from race, which we've touched on tonight, she joined a Senate that at the time required women to wear dresses and were not allowed to wear pants when they went on the Senate floor. Just think about that. It was a kind of an unofficial ban on pants within the dress code. Here's how Miss described it. There was a rebellion. The willingness of Braun to appear wearing trousers was that rebellion, and ultimately a big deal. So, on matters big and small, we have to deal with the world as it is, make sure people understand what it is, and then question, do we want to change it? And who are we? Are we everybody? Ideally, in society, in a democracy, the answer should be easy. The answer should be yes. Anyone and everyone can serve. We are joined now by Carol Moseley Braun, the former senator from Illinois, the first black woman to serve in that body. She ran for president in 2004 and also served as U.S. ambassador. Ambassador Braun, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Tell us what you've been thinking about since Sunday when the president endorsed his vice president, since she clinched the delegates in the days after, on through this week.
I'm over the moon and strongly supporting Kamala. Anything I can do to help get her elected. We have 98 more days to the election itself, and we all have to show up and be there for her and take advantage, not let this enthusiasm dwindle, which people have short memories sometimes. But if we can keep the drumbeat going, we can have our first woman president. And she's well competent, qualified for this job. She's very competent, and she has checked all the boxes. So I just hope we can come together and do it.
In your path, which we showed a little bit moments ago, what did you deal with that you expected? And what, if anything, was unexpected or kind of came at you in the Senate that might be relevant to her or at least of interest to our viewers?
I used to call it hyperspace because so much came at me so quickly that I did not expect it at all. And so I had to try to be nimble enough to manage that situation and to handle all the barbs and all the criticisms and all the stuff that was thrown at me, some of which was true and most of which was not. I just had to deal with it. And so my advice to if she wanted it, would be don't let them get under your skin. You know, you just have to, she probably knows this already. I know she does. But if she just maintain her composure, keep saying what she believes in, and speak directly to the hearts and minds of the American people, she'll be fine.
There's a line from you in history to Obama to her. One of the reasons that we've seen more representation that looks more like America in the House than the Senate is it's all cut up in the districts. News junkies, political junkies know that. A lot of people don't realize, right, that when we say senator, big job, it's for the state. It's a geographic job. But it has been harder historically for minorities to win statewide. You did it, as mentioned. Obama did it. Harris campaigned for him. I want to show a little bit of that as we look at all of these interesting linkages. Take a look.
I remember being in Iowa, Des Moines. It was really, really cold. Christmas through New Year's, and everybody was there. You know, us Californians, we didn't really know what to wear. So we just layered. The president we just celebrated his first 100 days, and we couldn't be more proud because it was the most work that any elected president of the United States in recent memory has actually accomplished. Not just talk, but accomplished. From his first days, he did what he promised us he
What do you see as the linkages here in what is still a relatively select group? As I mentioned in my introduction to you, a group that we would hope would continue to grow and enlarge in both parties, by the way. What do you say to the political folks, the operatives, who, separate from inspiration, are concerned that Kamala will have to do something that is different than other officials? She will be, in many states that have never had a black governor, a black woman governor or senator, she'll have to get that state electorate comfortable with that statewide, and they've never had a practice session, if you will.
But that's what democracy is about, is opening up the doors and letting everybody participate and contribute to keeping our country strong. I mean, this is quintessential democracy test. And she is up to it because she's already shown that she can do the job. She's already shown that she knows how government should work and that she's on the side of the people. So as long as we keep focused in on what's in the public interest, I believe we will do well and protect our country.
And on the politics, Trump had welcomed the first Biden debate. Many people would say it worked out better for Trump than Biden. We all lived through that. Now, though, he has not signaled the same willingness to debate her. What do you make of that?
Fear. Fear and cowardice, if you will. He's just a chicken, and you can quote me on that one. He's just a quick chicken, and he's a bully. He picks on people he thinks he can get away with. You know, he can get away with it by picking on them, calling them names, calling them out of their names, and just being silly. You know, things that nobody else would do. You know, corrupt Joe. Like, what are you talking about? You know, you're the felon. Like, excuse me, you know, here's a felon calling somebody else corrupt. Who ever heard of such a thing? So I think that she's more than able to take him on, to speak truth to power, to speak truth to him, and to repulse any of those kinds of insults back at him.
The quest for freedom is stronger than steel, more permanent than concrete.
They knew the difference between freedom and tyranny, and they stood up for the one and they damned the other.
We know what works. Freedom works. We know what's right. Freedom is right.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction.
It may be hard to remember now, that's why we showed it, but there was a time when Republicans thought they had a monopoly on the word freedom. But now, as the MAGA version of that party rifles through libraries to find books they can ban and rips abortion rights away from American women, as they did just today in Iowa, Democrats have a real opening to make the case that actually they are the party of freedom. Just listen to how Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro talked about Donald Trump and freedom earlier today.
While he's hugging the flag, you know what he's doing? He's ripping away our freedoms. That's what he's all about, because here's what I know. It's not freedom to tell our children what books they're allowed to read. That's not freedom. It is not freedom to tell people they can go to work, but they can't join a union. That's not freedom. It is not freedom to tell women what they're allowed to do with their bodies. That's not freedom.
Jon Favreau served as a speechwriter to President Barack Obama. He is now a co-host on the Pod Save America podcast, as well as co-author of the New York Times #1 best-selling book, Democracy or Else, How to Save America in 10 Easy Steps. No time like the present to read that one. Okay, so Jon, thank you for joining me. That's a really,
thanks for having me.
I thought thank you for being here. I thought that was a very good riff by Governor Shapiro. You've written a lot of these, and Pete Buttigieg has done a similar riff on freedom. A couple of people did. I wanted to get your take on Shapiro's riff and also Democrats' effort to kind of seize freedom back as a term they're using in their messaging.
Well, you remember, you and I were at the 2004 convention with our old boss, Barack Obama, who was then not our boss, but gave that very famous speech at that convention. And I think the reason people still remember that speech, which was now 20 years ago, is that what he did there was he tried to reclaim patriotism. And he reclaimed patriotism by letting people know that the values embedded in our founding documents, that we're all created equal, that we all have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that when we haven't lived up to those ideals in the past, men and women in this country have fought and bled so that we actually could, so that we could make things better. And then every time that happened, we broadened the American story. We broadened the American family to include more people and provide more freedom for people. And I do think that what Josh Shapiro and Kamala Harris and a lot of Democrats right now are doing is trying to reclaim that patriotism from Donald Trump and his party, because their patriotism is an airbrushed patriotism. And Donald Trump, as Josh Shapiro has pointed out, likes to talk down America all the time. And I do think like making that context is really important, especially since Trump and the Republicans have embraced ideas that are so far outside the mainstream and so extreme.
No question about it. It was interesting watching the Republican riffs from years ago. Some of them seem a little robotic. That was one of my takeaways, too. But so let me ask you, the Democratic convention feels like it's far away. It's not that far away. And we've seen, the country has seen, I should say, the vice president's stump speech, her attack lines. It's been very well received. She's got a lot of good lines in there. But you've written a lot of convention speeches. They're different from your stump speech. And she's working on that now. No question about it. She has to be. How is it different? And what do you think, if you're them, you should be thinking about trying to land in that?
Well, I also think that Kamala Harris's convention speech is going to be even more different than the usual convention speech, because no major party nominee has ever reintroduced themselves to a national audience with their convention speech. Usually you do that with your announcement speech. You have plenty of time. You have the spring. And so I think she has to do a couple of things in the speech, which I imagine they're going to do, which she wants to reintroduce herself, talk about her bio, talk about what she's done, define herself on her terms, talk about her second term, talk about what her agenda is going to be, to the extent that that's different than the Biden administration's or even similar. People want to know what she's going to do. And I think that she also probably wants to embrace that sense of patriotism, because the Republicans and Donald Trump are going to try to paint her as other. She is not like us. It's us versus them. They do that with every Democrat. They've done that for the last several years. And because people don't know Kamala Harris as well as they knew Joe Biden, she's going to want to sort of define herself as someone who loves this country, who's been given every chance by this country, who's worked hard and wants to make sure that everyone else has that chance too, and that everyone else has that right to freedom that was in our founding document. So I think that's probably, she has a lot to do in the speech, but I think what they're going to do in the speech will end up being the stump speech she uses from the convention through to Election Day.
Oh, that's an interesting point. The other piece that's different about this convention, as you said, it's people. She's being introduced. That's part of what the convention is. She's being introduced uniquely because she's only been, the clear or the front runner for a week now. There's all these other former presidents, there's prominent governors, there's all these people who are going to give speeches. How does that orchestra work? I ask this because we love to talk about what's happening behind the scenes on this show to help people understand. And all these people are working on their speech, and they've had to readjust them since the politics of the 2024 campaign changed a week ago.
Yeah, I mean, look, each speaker, especially the primetime speakers, are going to want to credential Kamala Harris, talk about how they know her, what they know about her, what they know about her values, what she's done, what she will do. And I also think they have to make the case about why Donald Trump and J.D. Vance would be so bad for 4 more years. And so there's actually a lot more to get done at this convention than there would have been, I think, if Biden was the nominee, because I think Biden would have focused solely on the choice between what he's proposing and what Trump's proposing. In this convention, you have to introduce a new nominee, you have to introduce new policies, and then you still have to make sure that the choice between Trump and Harris is as clear as possible, and that it actually means something to people's lives, how Trump would affect their lives and how Harris would affect their lives.
We only have a few seconds left, and you may not have one person. You can name more than one. Do you have a vice presidential running mate choice?
I don't have a choice. I mean, I'm as Waltz-pilled as anyone else, but I also think Josh Shapiro would be fantastic. I think Mark Kelly would be fantastic. Any of those 3, to me, I'd be pretty excited about.
Your top 3. In the spirit of the Olympics, they all get a medal. Jon Favreau, thank you, as always, for joining me. Everyone go buy his book if you're inspired right now. Really appreciate it. I've got one more thing to tell you about before we go today. We're back after a very quick break.
And we've been talking for a long time.
you and I, back when you were in the Texas State House, where you were fighting injustice. And now we've got this campaign, this Trump campaign that's running. It's got its own Bible behind it. It's got the Project 2025, and it's a recipe for undoing some of those civil rights, whether it be abortion, whether it be voting rights. It's all in this book. Democrats have something to completely fight against right now.
Literally the way that I phrase it is that they're playing in our faces. And so it's on us to make sure that we read up. This isn't about us out there just spewing, the typical kind of campaign rhetoric. We have serious threats that we're facing, threats that they've already started to put into place. What most people don't realize is that the Heritage Foundation has been working on this for decades. And so when I served in the State House, when we were looking at the vigilante bill that they brought as it relates to reproductive access in the state of Texas, that was a Heritage Foundation bill. They made sure that they sent that same bill to Florida. They have sent it all over the country. So when we see these 6-week bans, it actually comes out of their think tank. All of the CRT nonsense that we were getting when everybody, like this, a Democrat was like, we don't teach CRT, right? And we were having to educate people. We were trying to tell them what is and what isn't CRT instead of just saying, listen, the Heritage Foundation has decided that they are trying to delete Black folk from history, and that's what this is about. They tried to dress it up and call it something else, but they were the ones that pushed that bill. So we know that this has actually been underway. They now have just had the audacity to laud it to the extent that they have laid it out in almost 1,000 pages so that they could hand it out to their sycophants. And the problem is that the cultists that are following Trump, they don't really care what's in anything if they're actually going to pick up a book and read. All they care about is that their cult leader is going to be back in office. But for the rest of us,
we got some warning to do.
We've got some warning to do.
So here's the thing. On one hand, there's this, right? There's this existential threat to democracy that you and I spend a lot of time talking about. On the other hand, Kamala Harris is going out there and has caused a level of excitement and enthusiasm and engagement in a conversation about a future. She's talking about, we can do this together. We are America. We can create this remarkably bright future. Those things sort of don't seem like the same thing, but it's working for her.
Yes, it is. I tell everyone that the word of the week has been hopeful. That was for last week, because that is the word that people kept saying. And the last time we talked about hope was back in 2008. And so we're seeing that same level of kind of groundswell where people are organically coming together. As it was mentioned, as Rachel was just talking about, is just the different calls. I was so sad that I couldn't be on the white dude call because I wanted to see what all was going on. But I am excited, but we've got to carry this for 100 days. It can't just be that we got excited for the first 7 or 8 days. This has to be translated into actual votes.
But that's about building a coalition, right?
Yes.
And you, again, coming from Texas, in the heart of some really dark times, you understood that it doesn't matter that you're definitely not winning that next vote, because you knew every time you weren't going to win that next vote. But people came out to the legislature. People came out. You brought people together. This is the coalition building that Kamala Harris needs to engage in and is engaging in for the next 99 days.
Yeah, she is building her own coalition. It's kind of like what we saw with Barack Obama, where it wasn't necessarily just the traditional. He was going and grabbing people that had never been engaged in politics, and some of them checked out after they voted that one time or maybe the 2 times. But I think that she's doing that. And I think that she is exciting young people at the levels that we need them to be excited about. We know that in the midterms, they were saying that there was going to be this red wave, and they kept looking at how engaged young people were and how they managed to stave off this red wave. And we've seen this Republican House. We know what they're up to. Right now, I'm supposed to be at work. It's just by happenstance that I'm not, or it's literally because they are nothing but chaos creators. We are supposed to be working on the budget this week, and we're going on recess a week early. So guess what? We're going to roll up on the same deadline that we've rolled up on a couple of times, where it's a matter of, are we going to shut down? When we go back, it'll be September. That is our deadline. You're talking about people that are trying to convince you that they're going to take care of the economy when they won't even pass a simple budget. That is insane.
Right.
And we recently heard, you played the clip of Trump and him talking about basically how he's going to just never leave office. He tried to do it last time, if those people want to remember January 6th. But he's also talking in a week in which specifically Black Americans are looking at what happened to Sonia Massey. He's out there and he's talking about how, yes, I want to make sure that all police officers have
the
immunity.
freedom to do. Yes, he said it this week.
He said that. So when
they shot that woman straight in the head
in her home when she called them for help. Like, this is a problem in America. And for those that don't know, yes, we have tried to get the George Floyd and Policing Act passed, and it's passed the House, but we couldn't get it past the Senate. But even despite that, what President Biden did was executive orders. Whatever he could do to get portions of that bill done, he has done it. It's kind of like student loan forgiveness. Whatever he could do, despite what the Supreme Court has done, he's been able to relieve $174 billion worth of student loan debt. That is absolutely changing people's lives. And I've talked to people who have said, I think the highest number that I've gotten is that someone had $270,000 that was relieved. Can you imagine getting $270,000 off your back? It is presenting opportunities to build that generational wealth. And so while I know that nothing is perfect in this country, and there's definitely not a perfect party, I can tell you that there's one party that is trying to move us forward, and there's another one that is consistently trying to drag us back. I think that that's why it's so important that President Biden showed up today in Austin, Texas, so that we can be reminded of the rich history that he has. And it was so amazing because he had Ambassador Andrew Young there, his connections to the civil rights movement. Now, you ask Trump about his history, and you've got to go back to the Central Park Five, or you've got to go back to the fact that he and his dad were wanting to keep Black folk from having the ability to have housing.
As a Black woman, prominent Black woman in politics, I'm sure you're not at all surprised by the attacks that have been launched on Kamala Harris. What's surprising is the degree to which most of them are not landing, and they're being turned around by the K-Hive into fun things about Kamala Harris. I mean, what a horrible thing for somebody who's trying to insult someone to have it turned around and motivate more people.
Yes, definitely. DEI has now definitely earned it. So I will continue to use the DEI phrase as they try to make it a negative thing. But I think that that is the beautiful thing, because what they could be doing is having actual policy discussions. But the problem is their policies don't meet the measure of what everyday people are looking for. It meets what the billionaires that are going out and donating to Donald Trump, what they want, absolutely, as he talked to the oil and gas billionaires and told them, you need me back because those Trump tax cuts will expire in 2025. And just again, to rewind the record, Trump ran our national debt up $8 trillion in his 1 4-year term. This isn't somebody who's fiscally responsible. This is somebody who looks out for his homies and himself. And the rest of us, we're left footing the bill.
Project 2025 will tell you that it's things that go to people, benefits that go to people, that's running the deficit up. But that's not true. It's tax cuts.
It's absolutely tax cuts. And this, again, is at a time in which we don't have a farm bill passed in the House. It was supposed to be passed last year because the Republicans are saying we want to cut $30 billion from SNAP. And I'm trying to yell it to rural America. Rural America uses more SNAP benefits than urban America. But guess what? Those Republican reps that represent rural America, they are fighting against them. I tell people all the time, I'm not just fighting for my constituents, I'm actually fighting harder for yours as well. And so we need to remind people that they say, you know what, it's too much for people to get $6 a day to eat. But hey, these rich folk up top, we've got to make sure that we're saving them as much money as possible. Is that the type of leadership that you want in the future in these United States of America? Or do you want someone who believes in growing the economy from the middle out? And that's what the Biden-Harris team has done this entire time. And it is what Vice President Harris is prepared to continue to do, is to expand upon opportunities for those that have come to this country, a country that is supposed to represent possibilities as well as freedom.
It's good to see you in person, as always, but I always have to thank you because you always answer the call. When we need to talk about something important, you're available to us. So
well,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And please, please, please keep pushing the message around Project 2025.
We absolutely will. Jasmine Crockett is a member of Congress from Texas.
Before he was VP candidate, J.D. Vance made his name in VC. That's venture capitalism. He says he launched businesses specifically to help families like his back home. But those who knew him say his career wasn't much to write home about. Vance spent less than 5 years as a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, moving between 3 different firms and pouring money into one big investment, a company that went bankrupt. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, one former colleague who worked with Vance during his stint at a firm owned by Peter Thiel, his big political backer, claims they never even saw Vance in the office. But he has leaned into this part of his bio on the campaign trail, the successful venture capitalist. And tonight he returned to Silicon Valley for a fundraiser at the private home of a cryptocurrency executive. Joining me now to discuss, Teddy Schleifer, who covers campaign finance for the New York Times, and Brian Schwartz, CNBC political finance reporter. Brian, here's the thing. Less than 5 years, not even as a venture capitalist, just working in the industry, okay? He did not have some big baller VC career we're talking about. So what is the success story that should make him worthy of being our vice president, right? He didn't have a big booming business career. He didn't have a long political career. So what's he selling us?
Well, I mean, what he's selling you is that short-lived career, and he's being able to take that story and leverage that for relationships that have been helping him his political career for years. You talk about Peter Thiel. This is somebody who put millions of dollars behind his run for Senate. You know, Thiel also put money behind, Blake Masters when he went up against Mark Kelly and lost. But, J.D. Vance was his guy and continues to be his guy in a way. And so how many years he's been doing this, and I know that I've read the Journal story, and how, I think I mentioned, as you said, that, somebody who talked to the Journal said he didn't even see Vance in the office and when he worked at the firm that Thiel founded. I mean, so, at the end of the day, however long he was there, how little time he might have been working, how much time he was working as a venture capitalist, he's been able to leverage those relationships. And I think that's also the reason why he's in Silicon Valley tonight, Stephanie.
And that's the question, why? If he didn't have some big, giant, successful career, why exactly is he able to leverage those relationships? What do those people know about him? What can they control in him that they can get? Teddy, you've written a lot about this, and one of the companies he founded, APP Harvest, was sued by its investors just months after Vance left the board because he was running for Senate, and they sued the company because they claimed they were misled. That company went bankrupt last year when J.D. Vance was 1 year in office as a junior senator in Ohio. What exactly is this man hanging his hat on? His story that Brian talks about, does it check out?
I mean, I think what we got to understand about his career in venture capital is this was happening at the exact same time of his book. The book came out, Hillbilly Elegy, just around the time that he began his tenure at Mithril, which it's impossible to separate kind of the fame he achieved as an author. And, you might have your critique of his venture capital career, but as a literary figure, his book was a massive success, and it enhances credibility. And the reason what he's running for president today, vice president today, and was elected to the U.S. Senate is not because of his VC career, but it's because of Hillbilly Elegy, which, was, of course, made into a successful Netflix movie. And, he became a well-known figure for his critique of Trump, for his, lectures about working-class America. And I don't really think about him as a VC who ran for political office. I think about him as a media personality who ran for political office, because that's why he was able to become such an integral part of the Republican infrastructure and establishment in Ohio. And when you listen to why Trump chose him, he talks a little bit about his career in VC, but even Trump knows that you don't become a famous VC with 5 years in Silicon Valley, but you can certainly become a famous media figure with one hit book. I would think the main qualification or the main job that J.D. Vance has had is not VC, but author.
It's an extraordinary book, and it awakened us, many people, to this sleeping giant in parts of the country, this forgotten America. But J.D. Vance isn't running on any policies that help that part of America. And if that is who he wants to help, why is it, Brian, that all these luminaries in the world of tech and Silicon Valley, why do they want to back him? Because they're not actually interested in the Rust Belt of America.
Well, because they're telling Trump and Vance are saying some of the things they all want to hear, right? When I listened back to Donald Trump's speech, for instance, at the Nashville Bitcoin conference. I know we're talking about tech here, but the same jam. And basically, the things that Trump touched on were firing Gary Gensler when he becomes president, putting together this, Bitcoin set of experts to guide policy. This is, all the things that some people who own crypto, especially executives who invest in the crypto space, have been wanting to hear for years, since Joe Biden became president, since Gary Gensler became the chair of the SEC. Now, I don't know if that message is resonating with everybody. I still think there are some people in the tech world and the crypto space who are very much open to listening and hearing out the Vice President Harris. But it certainly is resonating with enough people that when you watch back that speech that Trump had in Nashville, there was a standing ovation for certain parts of that, particularly the part where he took aim at Gensler directly. So I think what they're doing here is they're just saying some of the things that some of these folks have just wanted to hear, frankly, at the end of the day. Whether or not Trump and J.D. Vance go ahead with any of these policy proposals, if they get into the White House again, remains to be clear, to be quite frank.
And you've got to wonder what J.D.'s ideology is going to be, because people who don't like Gary Gensler detest Lina Khan. And while he has been a senator, J.D. Vance has been a huge supporter of what she has done. Teddy, but not everybody, because I want to be clear, not everybody in the world of tech and in the VC world is backing Trump and J.D. Vance. We're actually seeing sort of political brawls within Silicon Valley kind of spill out into public view. Just the other day, I interviewed Reid Hoffman, co-founder of LinkedIn, who is backing Kamala Harris in a big, big way, and with the likes of Ron Conway and others pulling a big coalition together to do the same. It's where Kamala Harris is from. Tell us what's happening here.
Mm-hmm.
Geographically.
Sure. I think people, right. I think people got to understand the culture of Silicon Valley and how rare this is. A lot of these people went to college together. They were in each other's weddings. They're all about the same age. Lots of them are white men, which we should note. I mean, these are a group of people who became billionaires together. Isn't that sweet? And now over the last, I would say really beginning around the time of COVID, but it feels like especially so now during the Trump presidency, during the Trump reelection campaign, we're seeing these friends have these beefs. And, look, people have strongly held political beliefs about the world and about issues like abortion or issues like AI. And, people are entitled to their own beliefs. But you've seen people like Elon Musk go after Reid Hoffman's ties to Jeffrey Epstein. You've seen David Sachs call other people idiots. And these aren't just like random people they know on the internet. These are folks who they would have called their friends a couple years ago. And look, politics is at a fever pitch, and to some extent, we're just seeing the billionaire version of kind of the way that all of our friendships have been transformed by politics over the last couple of years. But as someone who's been in Silicon Valley was in Silicon Valley for 7 years, it's remarkable to see just these fissures between people who were in each other's weddings.
Just because you're rich doesn't mean you're decent. Teddy, Brian, thank you both for being here.